Hey guys, it's Claire, and welcome to In the Real, the podcast that provides a safe space to talk about whatever we want with absolutely no judgment. And I am so excited for today's guest. We have Nee Abrahams.
What's up?
Nee,
What's up?
why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what you do at AU, because that's how I know you.
Yeah, so my name is Nee Abrahams. I am the director of orientation and first year experience. So basically a fancy title where I just get to hang out with first year students and make sure that they have the best experience possible. So everything from orientation, so our what we call SOAR, which is students come on campus, they kind of get their classes, they get acclimated to campus, things like that, to welcome weekend. I lead a group of 24 phenomenal student leaders called peer mentors who are working with freshmen, all sorts of random stuff. So my job is just to make sure that first year students have the best experience possible as they kind of like integrate into college life. So yeah, that's a little bit about my role. I've been at Anderson for 3 years. The first 2 years I was in admissions, which I enjoyed, but I really enjoyed getting to actually work with students more on a hands-on basis. So that's the nutshell of kind of what I do.
Yeah, I didn't even know who you were before you started this current position. I didn't know you existed. I don't even know if correct me if I'm wrong, was there a position like yours before you came into the picture?
Yeah, it was really weird. So there was the position before was director of student success. And then that role kind of got shifted a little bit after the person who was in that role left. And so the university wanted to kind of be more intentional in dealing like with retention and stuff like that. So they kind of created this position. And it's funny because it's not just Anderson's admissions, but like every admissions team really like all over, because I've got to work with a lot of schools and admissions counselors from other schools. You're kind of like in your own world. It's like you're a part of the school, but you're kind of insulated because you're either traveling or you're so hyper focused on one particular thing. Like you saying that doesn't shock me because it's kind of true. When you're admissions, you don't really get to be a part of campus life in the way you get to be in other ways. And I'm also not an alum. So I have no emotional tie or investment to like the traditions and stuff like that would force me to be like, hey, like I want to stay on campus for X, Y, and Z. So it's funny you say that because one of the big parts I've enjoyed about my transition is actually getting to like be with students, to meet with people like you, and actually get to like be a part of like the fabric of, of campus life.
I came to school kind of as a senior in high school doing college classes, and I was integrated that way, like just going for a little bit and then coming home. And then I had a full year my freshman year, technically, to kind of get acclimated to things. But I definitely know a lot of my peers would have loved to have someone like you around to kind of integrate them into the culture of AU.
Yeah, it's, one of the things that I think is interesting. So often colleges are kind of like, hey, you're a freshman, we hope you figure it out. And they kind of just throw you. And not saying that there's not support, because that's definitely not the case. But one of the things that we're really trying to do is create, a comprehensive roadmap that's like a clear, like, hey, when you're a first year student, this is kind of what you're going to go through, so that we know that you find a place to belong, that you find the success that you need, and kind of go from there. Because it is a crazy transition. And honestly, so I started my undergrad. I went to Missouri State University for my undergrad, my master's, and I started my undergrad. I graduated high school in spring of 2010. So it has now been well over 10 years since I left high school and started college. And you forget how crazy the transition is. All of a sudden you're, asking to go to the bathroom, and the next second, like you're an adult. And that is a bananas kind of transition. And so it's been really good for me to kind of remind myself when I'm navigating, when working with freshmen, yeah, this transition kind of sucks sometimes. And there are a lot of things and support that needs in place. But eventually you become a senior like yourself, and you have it all. Well, you like to think you have it all figured out, know?
I think seniors would be the first people to tell you we don't have it figured out.
Oh, 100%. But when you're a freshman, you look at seniors and you're like, oh, they have it all figured out. And then when you're a senior, you go, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My friend Sydney, who's in my major, she has a job lined up for next year. She's engaged, she's getting married, and she'll be the first person to tell you she does not have it figured out, and she's very anxious. Yeah. But we all look up to her. We're like, how did you do it? And she's like, I don't know.
I've learned, so I'll be 30 next week, and I am realizing that so much of your 20s is, as dumb as it is to say, it really is kind of like fake it till you make it. You're kind of shifting gears from like young adulthood to like more adulthood, I guess. I don't even know how to describe it. But eventually you start doing things and you're like, oh, okay, like I can figure this thing out. And then you really move forward. But definitely out of college, there's a perception when you're a freshman that when you're a senior, you'll be like, oh, I got it on lock. And the reality is that is not the case.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, what I've noticed is the resources are available. It's just, for me at least, until you came into the picture, we didn't know they were available because they weren't advertised for us.
Yeah. And that's so much of the process, is learning how to. It's one thing when the resources are there, but it's another thing to feel like you have access to it and you can utilize it, and so for me, and what we're trying to create, and our campus continues to get better at collaborating, is how do we make sure that these resources are in front of students to know that they can use it? Like, hey, we have counseling services. Hey, like we have, you can get study tips, like all these different things are available for you. Sometimes you have to put it right in front of students and not just hope that they figure it out, but say like, no, like it's literally right here.
And I think, unfortunately, we didn't know all these things until COVID hit, and we were forced to kind of adapt, and the school was forced to adapt to what we needed at the time.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you. So for you, what's been, if you were to say like there was a resource, or like maybe it was a professor or someone that you're like really impacted your college career in terms of success, or like that made a good experience, who would that be, or what resource would that be?
I want to say Professor Leiter, who is my advisor now. I was in film, and I love doing it, and I love whatever. I just wasn't good at it. And she kind of showed me this world of, hey, maybe you're more suited for event planning and organization rather than like literally just creating stuff. Like you can be part of the logistics side of that too. And I said, okay. And I started PR, and I never looked back. Like if it were not for Professor Leiter showing me that this is what I wanted to do and actually helping me understand what that was, because none of us PR majors knew what PR was before we got to college.
Yeah.
It's not explained very well until you get there, for sure. No, I've gotten to do so many amazing things, and I feel so passionate about what I'm doing. I feel like I'm actually doing a good job. And I'm not second guessing myself like I was in my other major. Shifting gears, we had some crazy things happen last night at the Oscars.
Oh my gosh.
What are your thoughts on the whole Chris Rock, Will Smith conundrum that went down?
Oh man, I wish I could have had this conversation like 5 times today. Here's where I'm at. There is no world where that's okay. No world. But, and I use but lightly, it's also, so one of the things I'm really like not passionate about, some people think I'm like non-committal. I just think it's really difficult for people to hold 2 truths at the same time. We like to either be really black and white. And so it's hard to wrestle, because oftentimes like we want to solve issues, but sometimes most things are like tensions to be managed, not problems to be solved. So for me, like there's 0 worlds where that's acceptable ever, right? Like you don't just like someone offends someone, you don't just go and smack them, right?
Unless it's hockey, then it's okay.
Yeah, okay. Unless it's hockey, then you get applauded for, and then it's, it's awesome, right?
In the real world, we can't do that.
Yeah, in the real world, like you're not taking a stick and smacking somebody, or you're just punching them and having everyone crowd around you and laugh and have a good time. So for me, it's like there's 0% chance that's ever okay. But on the other side, for someone who's been in the spotlight since he was a teenager, who's done every possible thing imaginable, for him to make a conscious decision to get up on national television live, smack a colleague and walk back, like that just doesn't come from like a moment of rage. Like that is something that was like, this is planned out, because for someone like Will or any celebrity, they're constantly, every decision they make every decision they make is calculated and processed, because that they live in a fishbowl. So for him to make that decision indicates that whatever was going on behind it was so great that it led to that outcome. Again, not a good outcome, crazy. But, whether it was about Jada and her condition, and that's everything I've been reading. I don't know if that's officially what.
She has alopecia. She's talked about it on her show.
Yeah. Like to me, like that was way out of bounds. And whether Chris knew that or not is like, regardless, like you just don't make those kind of comments. Now, I don't think it's warranted, by any means, but yeah, it was crazy.
I have two different thoughts because we get into Lighter's class this morning. She tested positive last week, so we're on Zoom. And she's like, this is real. This is happening. And so we start giving our thoughts. And then I get to Newton's class later that day. And he's like, I think this was staged. So I don't know what to think. I mean, watching it first, I thought it was staged because, you know, his hand doesn't make contact with Chris Rock.
Yeah.
But then obviously the reaction, if you watch the Australian version, they kept in the audio of what actually happened, and you can't swear on national television. So it's just like, I don't know, but honestly, it would make sense for a PR stunt with the ratings of the Oscars going down and whatnot. Obviously, violence gets people to pay attention, apparently.
It just feels like
not in a great way.
It just feels like there's got to be a better way to get ratings. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if that's what we're resorting to, like, that just feels weird to me. But also is weird because it's, if I were Will, as if I would ever be Will, like, to me, I understand him yelling.
Yes.
From, like, that makes sense.
Yes.
Like, I could understand and rationalize that. It's like part two. Well, I guess that happened after the fact, but it's the hitting that it's like, I can't comprehend that part, you know?
They both could have handled it a lot better. If Chris wanted to make that joke, and he's made offensive jokes in the past, he should have gone up to Jada previously and said, can I make this joke? I just want to run this by you. I might go ahead and make it, but I wanted to let you know that that's what's going to happen, so that she would have a chance to react before it was live on TV. Wow. And then for Will, he could have sat in his chair and said the exact same words that he said, and it would have come across just as well and classier. He didn't need to get up and do that.
Yeah, and I think that's the, I guess that's the thing for me, is like, I feel like there were different ways to do it, but again, it's easy to be a bystander and say this is how I would have handled it, but in the moment when you have zero context, you can't make that call. And also too is also like, you know, so many jokes, especially at a moment like that, are like, there's some that's scripted and stuff like that, but a lot of that's just like in the moment. And so it also brings light to like being really intentional with even in the moment stuff, because you never know what someone navigates or is navigating through. It's whew.
There's things that make me think it's staged, make me think it's real. Things that make me think it's staged is if you, obviously there's no contact on the hit, at least it sounds like that and seems like that, looks like that. And then was Will's walking off, he's kind of smirking.
See, I thought I mean, you're a film person, so you probably know more. It looked like it hit to me, but again, like, you probably have seen more stage fights than I have. I don't know. The only thing that's weird is Chris, like, doesn't really move. Like, I feel like if I was hit, like, I would at least like stumble back, or I would like react a lot different.
Yeah, so maybe like, I'm gonna stand on this side of the stage now.
Right. Like, for Chris to like get hit like that and then just kind of like stand there and then just keep going makes me think like, unless he has like the composure of no man I've ever met, like, it's just really hard to imagine getting smacked and then standing there. You know? Makes
me think it's a little staged, because then P. Diddy announced this morning that everything's cool. Like, how does that get resolved so fast?
I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, he tweeted about it or something. We heard about it in marketing. But then another moment that makes me think it could be real was during Will's speech. He could barely get through it, and he was like repeating himself and saying a bunch of things that didn't make sense, and he was crying, because I feel like that's him processing that he made a mistake.
Oh, for sure. And like, you know, he apologized to everybody but Chris Rock, and was very clear making parallels to like defending his family, you know? So it's like, clearly he's like talking about it without talking about it, but it was still just like, what in the world? And it's Will Smith. Like, you're just like, wait, what? But also, if you've been doing it forever and you're an old man, you can just kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, if I were him and I would have accepted that award, I would have said, hey, I'll accept it at a later date. I made a mistake earlier. I don't feel comfortable accepting the award right now.
Yeah, I mean, but he didn't feel like he was in the wrong, clearly, you know?
Well, so, I think he did in a way, but like, obviously he wasn't going to say that because he was processing so many things. But either way, if it's staged or not, what is that teaching people? That it's okay to hit people?
Well, exactly. And it never is okay. I mean, never. No. A lot of people watch that. Yeah, it's what a weird night.
No, I think they could have gone through publicity so much better. Like, two big names right now are Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya. Just get them to do something like weird and like simple. Everyone would have watched the Oscars.
Right. That's why I'm like, there are a lot of smart people who put these things together. And if the whole thing was to get ratings, there's a much better way to do that. But again, maybe it's so diversive, or it's so next level that was on stage. But I don't know. I can't imagine it, but who knows?
And who are the Oscars for airing that? Like, it happens like 15 seconds in advance. They could have just put a black screen, said technical difficulties. We'll be back after commercial.
That's true. I don't know how all that stuff works on the back end. You have a lot more context than I do, but I never even thought about it from that perspective.
No, yeah, when there's live television, I can't remember if it's a 15-second or 30-second delay, but there's a delay that gives, technical directors and things like that time to bleep things or whatever, put text on the screen.
I always thought it was like just like a 5-second delay. So
no,
that time I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so we'll be still on, like, I'll be watching hockey. We're still on commercial break, but they've already started.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's 30 seconds or 15. I don't remember, but yeah, like they shouldn't have aired that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I mean, yeah, what's funny though is like, even if they don't air it, it still gets picked up on every social media outlet. So
I know, but at least the Oscars could have said, we don't condone this. That's why we didn't show it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Why is it important to have representation of all communities on a college campus?
Oh yeah, I love this question. Honestly, to me, representation is important for a couple of reasons, because it lets students know that who they are is valid and seen. And also too, there is a significance in learning from different cultures and learning from different perspectives and recognizing and seeing how there's different viewpoints of the world and how that impacts how people live their lives. When I was teaching, so prior to my role at Anderson, I taught at Ivy Tech downtown. I taught public speaking and interpersonal communication courses. And most of my students were Black or Hispanic and Hispanic Latino. And one of the things that was very clear to me, and a couple of students even told me, is like they really appreciated having a Black professor in their class. And that will always stick with me, because I think it's really important for them to know that, like, hey, like, I mean, I was an instructor in the class, but for them, it was like, hey, like, I could be X, Y, and Z. And so having that representation, not just for students, but for faculty and staff, I think is really important, because it shows students like, hey, where we're trying to go, I can get there. But then I think even more so, like I said, like the ability to learn is just so important, because it's so easy for us to grow up in the same place, the same type of people. And so to be able to like have representation and be like, hey, there are people who are different than me, and that's okay. I'm learning from them. You can't beat it, You
absolutely can't. And I mean, that's why your role on campus to me is so important. Obviously, I'm white. I don't get the same level of discrimination by any means. Even my sexuality doesn't even compare to what people of color have to go through, but it's just so important to see that not everyone's white.
Yeah, and to recognize that, like, there are different spaces that have people have to navigate and occupy differently. For myself, I'm the son of an immigrant, and like all my family is in Ghana. There's like, I have a couple cousins in the States and a couple in London, but the rest are in Ghana. Like that's where all my family is. And I grew up in a very African household, but I also grew up in a very like white community in Southwest Missouri. So how do you navigate being Black and having the connotations of what that means in an all white community, but being raised in like an African household? Like when it comes to like Black culture, Black history, etc., I didn't have that growing up, because that's not my background. That's not my culture. Like we just, like, I didn't go to a barbershop till I was in college, because like, that's just not our culture. So even for me, like being exposed to people who were like me, but very different than me was really important, and so I went through a learning process of what does it mean to be Black in America? What does it mean even as to be African and in America? So yeah, it's a lot to unpack, but it's so important.
I mean, from my understanding, it can definitely be hard to be, well, obviously it's hard to be Black, but like navigating that as a child of, if you don't act this certain way, are you Black? Like, what does that even mean?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because, I was super involved in my school. I did debate. I played sports. I did all the things. So I often heard like, well, you're very articulate for a Black person, or, like, oh, you're an Oreo, or like you're Black on the outside, white on the inside. It's like stuff that like when you're younger, you just kind of internalize, and you're older, you're like, don't really know how I feel about that, but there comes a point when you just kind of get used to it. And then you get older and you're like, yeah, like that sucks, like,
Yeah, I mean, people who make these comments aren't necessarily, they're trying to relate, but it's still not the way to go about it, and it's super
sure.
wrong.
And again, it's like one of those things where it's like, when you have friends, like for me, I had friends that had grown up in the same place their whole life. Their parents were from the same place. Like they don't know any different. And again, like, I'm not saying that excuses it, but at the same time, at least like there's a context for it. And so for me, and really for anyone, for me personally, my personal journey is like coming to terms with what does it mean to be Black for me? What does it look like for me to be Black and have a white wife, and knowing that I'm going to have mixed kids? Being Black does not mean you have to be like or act a certain way. Being Black is who you are, and it's a part of who you are, but it's not the sum of who you are. And I think that's important, even on a college campus, as you continue to grow and learn, is that exposure, right? Of like, hey, like, I don't have to be this type of person to feel like I can belong. Like I can belong because I am, that sounds really cheesy, but it's true. Yeah.
Well, we have reached the end of our episode, but because we're on Zoom, we can't do the lovely signing of my plaque, but I'll bring that into your office this week and get you to sign that. I have all my guests sign it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just like saying, hey, I interviewed this person, obviously. But yeah, I had an absolutely amazing time speaking with you, Nee.
Thank you. And thanks for connecting. I remember the first time we like met, you came into my office to talk about an article. And then it just kind of like all came from there. And it was like, I just thought I'd like get to connect with you once or twice. And then here we are. Like you are a superstar. So thanks for allowing me
Thank you. I think we have Melody to thank for that, because if I wasn't doing the article on her, I wouldn't have met you.
No, so shout out Mel.
Shout out Mel. She's not going to watch this. She's busy doing her thing.
I love it. Well, thanks, Claire. I really appreciate it. And I know that you have a big heart for people, and I'm excited to see what you do.
I'm excited too. It's crazy that it's so soon.
I know, but it's just the beginning, and there's gonna be a lot of things ahead, but I think you have the tools to be successful. And as long as you keep being who you are, things will turn out the way it's supposed to.